everyone. We covered a fair amount of ground in the previous video, but there's still a surprising number to go. Games that were published originally on the PlayStation 3 and were never, in their existing form, ported to another platform. And I'm being quite strict. If they had a PS Vita version, no, then they're not an exclusive. If they were ported a bit later to the PS4, no, that's a separate category. Today I have a little native bird as my assistant, a bird that always delights in particular Poodlepa when he's working out in the garden because they're always around. It's the New Zealand fantail, the Piwakawaka they're called, and they're too cute the way they sort of flip their tails about. And I love these little plushies because they come with a small sort of voice box that carries a recording of the authentic bird sound. So let's dive in. The PS3 is actually pretty straightforward to collect for, and there aren't many games that are really up in the stratosphere in terms of pricing and rarity. As I said before, I'm pretty slapdash. I'm really quite eclectic, and being restricted to what is essentially a very small market in New Zealand doesn't give me as many options, and I often have to painfully try and find something overseas and work out if I can import it. So naturally I don't have quite the range of options available as other collectors might. But I think in a way that's probably quite good, because otherwise, if one of these more professional collectors showed you their collection, you might be in so much awe of what they have achieved and how they did all that you might get worried about never starting yourself. Whereas what I've been doing is eminently achievable, because as I said, I just stumbled into it and, well, obviously just started buying games for the PlayStation 3 when I started gaming, because that's what you did back then. You also got a few games as digital downloads, but many games were marketed physically, and that's how most of us bought them. That was just the normal way of doing it, so I started buying them, and that's why I have a lot of those games. I will tell you when I have a game that I bought only recently, because that indicates that I wasn't aware of the game earlier on maybe, and that I possibly had problems getting hold of it, or only got it as an afterthought. Because in the beginning I wasn't purchasing in terms of thinking of having a collection. I was just buying the games I wanted to play week to week, month to month. Later on I bought with more of a mind to, oh yes, I think I would like that game, to have it both in the collection and to play at a later unspecified date. And I have quite a few games like that still. So let's start with a game that is probably not an exclusive, but I'm not quite sure. It is listed on what I would call the most authoritative lists for PS3 exclusives. It is listed as one, Demon's Souls. But we all know that it recently received a very extensive makeover, a complete remake for the PlayStation 5. So technically Demon's Souls is not restricted to the PS3 anymore, but the version on the PS5 is probably, I mean, I obviously don't have it, is probably so different that it can't be considered the exact same version anymore, even though it is technically the same game. So a bit of interesting case, an unusual one. I don't know how would you regard it? Would you think this is still an exclusive, or would you say, nah, not anymore? So I'm just putting that out there. I also wanted to show you this copy as a warning indicator. This is one of these reprints that PlayStation did, and they had several sort of brand names or labels for these. This one's called Greatest Hits, being a North American release, and we also have PlayStation Essentials. I will be able to show you one of those later, and I think there was a third label which at the moment I can't quite think what it was called. So any of those which aren't the original release are generally not as highly regarded by collectors. I simply grabbed this copy very, very late in the piece because, like most people who've had a PlayStation 3 and been on PS Plus, I've had Demon's Souls forever and ever. As a PS Plus game, it's been on my hard drive. But last year, when we had that big panic shock announcement that the store would be closing down, I scrambled about and thought, which games do I have on PS Plus that I really need to make sure I have a physical copy just so that I can play it if I'm not a PS Plus subscriber anymore. And this was one of them, and I just grabbed the first copy that came my way. Obviously not ideal. I would prefer a one that is the proper original release, and watch out for traders who send you copies without manuals, where it wasn't clearly indicated in the description. That is a real gotcha, and I just want to make sure that you're aware of that, and check and double check, and if necessary ask before going to the extent of maybe importing a copy from somewhere because you can't get it locally. As a collector, this doesn't pass muster, not by a long chalk. So I just wanted to mention that, and this was a good example. This is actually not an exclusive, it's Pirate Warriors 2, but I wanted to show you the cover. I don't have the original Pirate Warriors, it's just called Pirate Warriors, on PlayStation 3. I don't know why, but I don't have it. And to my surprise, it is definitely listed as an exclusive for the PlayStation 3. So maybe something to watch out for if you are after collecting exclusives. It doesn't mean that it's particularly rare or expensive, not at all. Obviously they're popular games and there were plenty of copies around. But I was thinking actually in terms of how do you want to structure your collection? You know, we talked about maybe by genre, etc. But I was thinking actually according to a category like exclusives is a neat sorting mechanism. I had a note here saying that this game is not on the PlayStation Network, at least not in my region, Pirate Warriors 2, so that's another reason to get it physically, of course. Okay, another surprise to me is Ratchet and Clank. I'm not a big Ratchet and Clank player, so these are the only two titles I have on the PlayStation 3. And in fact, I have a bit of a story about Into the Nexus, because I remember when it came out, and I bought it at the time, new, of course, and I played it a bit, and I thought, oh, I don't think I'm a big Ratchet and Clank person, and I had enough, so I sold it somewhere on one of our trading sites. And years later, of course, as my collection had grown and I looked at everything, grown, I thought, why did I sell that game? What a silly thing to do. The message is, hang on to them if you can, if you have the storage space. Now, this is a topic I wanted to mention, and thank you to one of my subscribers who brought it up and who said he'd love to do more collecting, but it's really a question of storage space, and it really is. You know, 1 or 2 games may not look like they occupy a lot of space, but once you get up to 100 and then maybe 200, and a whole cupboard, is gone and you're spilling over. If you're maybe in a small apartment or something, this is a real consideration. So being able to constrain your collecting criteria looks to make more and more sense, really. That was a topic I wanted to mention. Don't just jump in and buy everything in sight, assuming you had the money. Most of us don't. And then find you've got games and game boxes lying about everywhere. Yeah, that's how accidents happen, of course, and things get damaged or lost. So just consider, have you got enough shelf and cupboard space and maybe some deep drawer somewhere where you can store away all these goodies. It sounds really basic, but collecting is as much about basics as it is about having a bit of a nose for it and a good eye as well. Nose and eye, So those are the only 2 I have physically, and they're obviously not particularly expensive, although I did notice that Into the Nexus, certainly for me in the PAL region, was getting a bit difficult to get hold of at least a decent copy, because many PlayStation 3 games, especially if you go to shops where games get traded in all the time, like GameStop, EB Games, a lot of copies are often in pretty tatty condition, often missing the cover art. The disc has the last McDonald's meal encrusted on it. Yes, I've seen it all. Yeah, so I noticed that it was getting just a bit more difficult to find. So if you're into Ratchet and Clank, please hold on to your copies or complete your collection of them. The list I have, and this is still the same list I mentioned in the previous video, the 2 I'm consulting here is just a straightforward Wikipedia one, which is pretty reliable on the whole, and the extensive one on Reddit. And I will credit the person who compiled that in the details I give in the description, because he did a superhuman job there. So there's a lot of Ratchet and Clank games listed as exclusive to the PlayStation 3. A Crack in Time, Quest for Booty, The Tools of Destruction, All for One, and Into the Nexus. But all of them are also available digitally, so there's no pressure on the market from that point of view. They're both physical and digital. And of course, with these popular games, you find that most of the time plenty of copies were printed. The problem of the supply and demand issue doesn't really arise as much, and with the PS3 you'll be able to pick up copies in most areas of the world pretty cheaply still, I think. Especially now that the pressure is off in terms of Sony not closing down the PS3 store online on PSN, at least not for the time being, but let's not expect that to last forever. An icon for PlayStation is Sackboy, Little Big Planet. So here we have Little Big Planet 1 and 2, which are both exclusive to the PlayStation 3. They never bothered bringing them to, like, the PlayStation 4. Only LBP3 made it. Just in case you're wondering, the Vita version of Little Big Planet is quite different. It's a different game from all the others. So there is no overlap in terms of, it's not a port, so these truly are exclusive. I've had Little Big Planet, of course, digitally on my PlayStation 3 forever. It's one of those things you forget about actually getting a physical copy. So by the time I started looking, there were only pretty manky-looking pre-owned ones around. A Little Big Planet 2, it does have the manual and the disc is okay. But as you can see, I would still have to do a bit of work on the case. This horrible sticker problem and not being able to get them off. And we don't have the sort of products available here that I know you have in the States, this goo removal thing, whatever it's called. So I have to be a bit careful. It's actually quite easy to damage the case. But it'll do. What will not do, of course, is this. You get a game, but it comes in a cracked case or a non-PlayStation case. I was lucky that the cover art came with it, and the manual is available there, but I obviously have to fix the case issue. And it's actually not that easy anymore where I live to find cases for the PS3. I used to be able to just buy them, empty ones, but that's all gone, of course. So I need to find some old cheap game, which I get just so that I can get the case to put on. Yeah, what else can you do? Yeah, so in terms of having a collection, this is lazy. Let's call it what it is, lazy. I should have had that fixed a while ago. You see, with this edition, it's got the black band down the side, the indicator of the very early original PlayStation 3 games. They had this black band. It taught me a valuable lesson late in my collecting life, not to wait forever getting a physical copy of what is an important game. Another very popular game series on PlayStation is surprisingly also still an exclusive, and that is inFAMOUS. And, I don't know why I bought the Essentials label edition, because I bought it years and years ago, so it must have been already so popular. Yes, inFAMOUS is definitely listed as a true exclusive. An action-adventure game, as most of you probably know, developed by Sucker Punch. And it was a huge hit for PlayStation. Published in 2009, Sucker Punch developed inFAMOUS as a change of pace from their earlier Sly Cooper series, which was stealth-based. But they used a similar comic book-inspired origin story to help the player become more connected with Cole, who is, of course, the main character in inFAMOUS. And I remember putting in the disc for the first time and playing the game, and especially the beginning. I mean, I can still see it almost frame by frame, the destruction in the city and how he's trying to, just clamber over this broken asphalt, and then, things develop, things happen, and he discovers his superpower. And it was just amazing, the feeling of being able to do all that. I really liked it straight away. Interesting trivia, the game was offered by Sony as a free download as part of their Welcome Back program after that big disaster in 2011, the PlayStation Network outage. So by 2010, It had sold already nearly 2 million copies, and it must have sold more since then. It definitely was a big success. This is the famous opening scene. We'll now come across Cole, our hero, knocked out.
What the hell happened? Oh God.
And here we see the extent of the devastation. It had a huge effect on me when I saw it the first time. First instructions, how to operate and survive in the environment.
Hey, you! In the garage! Get the hell out of there! Whole thing is coming down!
And the realization that you have to make it somehow across this devastation. So with an injured leg, Cole, or you, now have to make it across this landscape. And there's radio contact with his mate, and we're finally getting some kind of idea what's been happening.
TV says terrorists are blowing stuff up all over the city. Meet me at the Fremont Bridge. We'll get Trish and find some place to hunker down.
And here we get a first inkling of what has physically happened to Cole.
What the hell? Should be dead.
So I now need to find my way to Fremont Bridge, and without a map, of course, I'm always totally lost, so excuse my wanderings as I try to find a way through. Thankfully, the camera is actually good. Right from the get-go, the game creates a real urgency to your actions. You feel lost, disoriented, scared, and pushed to the edge to try and survive this. Great job by Sucker Punch, in my opinion.
What's happening to me? If you're able to walk, please evacuate across the bridge to the Neon. Remain calm. Emergency personnel are en route.
I finally made it to the bridge with the emergency services.
Cole! Over here, man! We gotta go! No! 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 Oh, no! It's the terrorists! Run for the bridge, Cole!
That was a terrible traversal, and Cole is unconscious now.
While sliding into unconsciousness, I could somehow, hear the voices of the dying. Thousands crushed by falling buildings or burned alive in the fires. Trish lost her sister, almost lost me. Zeke was always there, somehow sure that I'd wake up, while outside the city fell apart. A plague struck, followed by rioting, theft, rapes, civilization committing suicide. In a bullshit attempt to contain the biological threat, the federal government locked down all access in and out of the city. Now we're stuck in this cage with the psychos. Cops are all but gone off the streets, either dead or too chicken shit to stand against the gangs that control things now. Outside, things were bad. But inside me, something was beginning. Scary as hell at first. Gotta understand, there was no one to talk to, no experts to consult. But with time, I'm learning to control it, master it. Just hope it's not too late.
In just over 1 minute, Sucker Punch have set the scenario, and what an apocalyptic world it is. Nowadays, of course, we're very used to those scenarios. We find a new one almost every day on TV and in movies. But back then, I think that was still quite, not commonplace. Coal has become what's called a conduit, pretty obvious really, and here on the rooftop he's now practicing his newfound skills.
Woo! That's what I'm talking about!
The first exploration mission.
Man, you must be out of your mind.
I'm using the express elevator.
Oh, man, you get to have all the fun.
And that is so true. You can have a lot of fun with Cole's abilities. I certainly did.
That's what I'm talking about.
Whew! Oh, that was one hell of a jump, man!
The character models look perhaps a bit rough by today's standards. It is 14 years old after all, but I don't mind, honestly, because every character is drawn and modelled very expressively with a lot of character, unlike many you find in modern games which look rather generic to me. I'm speeding up a bit here because this is a very large map to run around in. I was really surprised by the extent of the world.
Well, it's stuck up there. I hate to say it, pal, but you're the only guy here who'd live from a fall like that. You gotta climb up there and knock that stuff free.
So the mission is clear, but it's not super easy finding your way. The game is good at giving you hints how to do practical tasks, useful for someone like me who doesn't normally have massive lightning powers to play with.
Stop screwing around. Yeah! We are eating!
Damn. Too late. That's where I caught my first sight. The Reapers. Before the blast, they were just a bunch of junkies dealing drugs. Now, they own the Neon District. Taking whatever they want. That changes today.
And here is our next mission. We're now into the fighting, and the controls are pretty straightforward and satisfying to use. Just occasionally there was maybe a slight delay or perhaps not 100% accurate, but you wouldn't expect that with a PS3 game, I think, of that age. Overall, I had a lot of fun with this.
Well, that's the last of them. It's chow time.
A lot of food here. Enough to feed the three of us for weeks, maybe longer. Bet if I fry a couple people in the crowd, the rest will run away. The food will be all ours, but some of these guys might starve.
And here we are introduced to the karma system, a system of moral choices which have consequences in the game. Of course, we're much more used to that type of system these days and much more refined. But back then, for me, it was quite a revelation, really. So I think by now you should have a pretty good idea of the nature and scope of the game.
Just doing what I can.
So I'll leave you with just one final scene showing Cole's much bigger problem.
Take a look at this, Empire City. The footage you're seeing was taken by a security camera near Ground Zero. This is the man that destroyed our city, our lives. Whoever he is, we're gonna make him pay.
Ever been called a terrorist? All I remember from that day is going to work and then running for my life. By then, people nearby were starting to recognize me. It was going to get ugly.
My question, why is this game marooned on the PS3? Is it not interesting enough? What do you think? I love the game. Thank you very much, as always, for your time watching these rather lengthy videos. Please keep well. I'm Food for Dogs. Bye-bye.